welcome back to the Covey Wellness Centre podcast. We are getting into season 3, and we're super excited about a lineup of guests, primarily authors and writers in this season, all around Canada, and talking to us about a range of topics. And today, we are kicking it off with Sarah Swain, who is hailing from Alberta, Canada. And we're going to be talking today about therapeutic alliance and the relationship with therapy and with your therapist and what that experience is like. But I'm going to toss it to her to introduce herself a little bit about the bio details and how she and I became connected. So Sarah, welcome to the podcast. So glad that you're here.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming. I'm so thrilled to be here. So thank you for having me on your show. I've got a mixed bag of a bio, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Nicole's notes of who I am and what I do. I live in rural Alberta with my husband and 3 dogs and 20 some odd chickens. Live a very simple lifestyle out here in the wilderness. Absolutely love it. By day, I am a digital brand strategist for revolutionary entrepreneurs. I'm the founder of Monetize Your Mind. And I've been on the journey of entrepreneurship since 2018 when I quit my corporate job with absolutely no backup plan other than I have an idea and I'm going to decide to trust myself. And so I've been on this entrepreneurial journey, I guess now for coming up 6 years. And I absolutely love it. I love my life. I love the work that I get to do. I love the people that I get to do it with. And I'm really excited to dive into this whole world of therapeutic dialogue because it has played a significant role in my life, specifically over the last couple of years, which is how you and I came to know one another. I found myself in a very dark period of my life in fall of 2021, during a very tumultuous time for the entire globe, and really didn't know what else to do at that point. And the only regret I have is not starting therapy sooner because I waited until I was in that crisis position, unfortunately, in order to take action. And obviously understanding the benefits of working with a therapist, which is you now for the last couple of years. We don't need to be in crisis mode in order to have beautiful conversations that help us in a plethora of ways through. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this because my experience in being in therapy and working with you specifically has been life-changing for me. As an entrepreneur, I have a lot of additional responsibilities when it comes to community leadership and being able to show up for my clients and my community with stability, let alone empowerment and integrity in actually being okay myself in order to show up and lead. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. So thanks for having me on your show, Sarah.
Yeah, no problem. It's my privilege and my pleasure to have you here. It's not typical for clients to want to come and talk about their experience on a live podcast. And so Sarah's kind of an exceptional client in that case and has been really transparent, publicly about this as an advocate for people, seeking healing and seeking to get that holistic care going in their lives, and therapy as part of that. And so it's really neat to have you as a spokesperson because I really do see that as an advocacy role to invite other people into the experience of therapy who might have hesitations or might not see its value or might feel that they've waited too long or that there's nothing to go for, So I love that thinking about therapy as a proactive and reactive option. And I think a lot of people come out of a reactive state where their functioning is compromised for any number of reasons interpersonally, for themselves in career decisions, in life-altering changes, in global pandemics or whatever. And they find themselves in a situation where they don't feel they have another choice but to seek help. And then it kind of tends to morph into more of what I would call like a maintenance of health kind of strategy where it's like, this is now one of my tools in my toolkit to not just overcome that terrible crisis, which of course we always want people to reach out when they're in a crisis to get support, but also to maintain my health as I go about my life. And for you, Sarah, as an entrepreneur, and interestingly, myself as an entrepreneur as well, that's sort of a niche. And similar to the fact that I was a teacher before and I have a real heart for teachers, entrepreneurs is another category of people where I really do see some very specific challenges that they have and responsibilities and leadership. And as you say, in integrity, in grounding, in staying, in our, I hate this phrase because of all the connotations from COVID, but the safe and effective use of self. But as people, we, our whole person, especially when we are entrepreneurs or when we're in helping professions, we give of our full selves in those roles. And so how do we safely and effectively do that in the best versions of those terms? So I think it's a really neat conversation that we can have here around that. And that will appeal not just to entrepreneurs, but there may be sort of a sweet spot there for some people who are in those kinds of leadership roles where they're wrestling down their own stuff in the midst of leading corporations or movements or, and how do you wrestle those things? So I would love to hear a little bit more about what you noticed in your mind, your body, your soul that caused you to reach out and seek help initially. Like, how did you feel at that time with that initial inquiry?
Yeah, I can still feel it when I bring myself
Mm,
back to that time period for myself because it was my body that was now saying you need to do something. I'm someone who almost has a stubborn level of mindset and commitment to mindset, and I would say that there's a dangerous line that can be crossed when we just try and fix our mindset, get stronger mentally, become more
mm,
headstrong because what ended up happening in my situation is that, and this kind of bleeds back into my career of just having to be that woman in that corporate environment, just to not just survive, but grow my
hustle.
career, like go mode, you know?
Yeah.
I had to shut a lot of like alarms and warning bells off in my mind in order to persevere. And so I
Mm,
became masterful at that.
yeah.
And in hindsight, I incorrectly um, had a false sense of pride in how strong I was mentally.
Mm,
So in 2021, there were things that I was starting to experience that I actually didn't know what tool to reach for anymore.
right.
I
You couldn't just muscle through.
I couldn't just muscle through. I couldn't pick up a book on my shelf and be like, oh, let me just get a dose of motivation or, change of perspective.
Self-help or
Yeah,
something.
and just power through my day. It dawned on me one day that I couldn't see past the end of the day. And
Mm,
as someone who is a visionary,
right.
someone who sees so long term, I'm always focused on the bigger picture, especially when it comes to business. What does the sustainable path look like? I'm not someone who goes after the short term goals. I'm the long term forecaster, and I get really excited about what's possible for our future. And I
Yeah.
realized one day that my only goal was to get through the day. It
Mm.
was no longer about, oh, okay, well, what does this small action that I'm taking today look like, in the
In the
compound
grand
effect,
scheme. Yeah.
grand scheme of things, what's this going to turn into at a later date? My goal was to make it to the end of the day without falling apart.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
there's this which I know to be my intuition, but it was this nudging that I was
Mm.
getting that if I don't address what's happening with me mentally, it's going to manifest itself physically. And it
It
was
was manifesting itself. It was starting in that. Yeah.
started to. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. There was, inflammation in my body, there was weakness in my body, there was tension in my body,
Hmm.
and the anger that I was holding, the rage that I
Hmm.
was feeling.
Hmm. Hmm.
I knew that if I did not figure out a way to be able to process it, or make peace with it or be able to feel those emotions and not let them completely decimate me, that
Mhm.
holding all of that in my body was going to end up becoming dangerous for my health. Like I just
Yeah.
knew that that was the path that I was on. And that's when I'm like, I got to talk to somebody. Like
Mhm.
I don't,
Yeah.
I literally do not know what to do. And I'm usually the woman that people come to
Yeah.
with problems. And I love solving problems. And I couldn't solve this one because every day, I remember telling you this on one of our early calls, every day I was waking up, I was at like a 9 out of 10 level of anger. And so
Mhm.
the smallest thing, God forbid if I stubbed my toe or got my belt loop stuck on a
Yeah.
knob or something, like I probably would have had a colossal catastrophic meltdown because I was at
Yes.
tipping point all day, every day. And so that
Yes.
I was very much in that reactive crisis mode. Um, and that's what caused me to reach out for support.
Mm.
I also needed to know that I could be safe with a therapist. We were in a time where
Mm.
I was hearing all sorts of stories about people like me and the beliefs that I hold and the views that I had of what was specific to the context of those times. The world of therapy was becoming unsafe for some
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
because the ideologies were so polarizing
Yeah.
that, like me, were actually put in unsafe situations by way of therapy when we were trying to
Mhm.
get help for ourselves because of what we
Yeah.
were experiencing. And so I asked my friend, one of the very few friends that I had left at the time, like how do I find somebody that I can trust? And lo and behold, she said, there's this therapist in my town. And judging by, the way that she was sharing, I can't remember what it was that you were
Yeah.
sharing on
It was
social.
yeah, about lockdowns or something.
Yeah. She's like, I think she might be safe. And that's how I found you.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. And that, I mean, I think about that and I think, wow, like I just actually get chills to think like how, divine or serendipitous or whatever word you want to use, it would be that you in rural Alberta are finding me in little tiny town Ontario. And that could be orchestrated at that time in that way. Like I'm just so thankful um, for that connection. But I mean, the stories for me through that time as a mental health professional, watching things unfold, it was just so difficult for me to watch how people were censored and ostracized and marginalized and pathologized and all these things that were just like unconscionable to me from a informed consent, non-judgment position that we are trained to be in as therapists. And so to hear that people were um, experiencing things that they were experiencing with people who are ethically trained as therapists, it was heartbreaking to me, but also like a call for me to rise up and try and be like, I think, I'm an Enneagram 1. I think everything should be done ethically and properly, and that's an orientation in my personality. So I'm like, well, everyone should be doing this. Like, you could have a pedophile sitting across from you and you are holding unconditional positive regard for that person as a person with human agency and dignity, and that you are not sitting in judgment of that person as a therapist. And so I couldn't understand how people were just, abandoning that oath kind of thing as a therapist, and yet they were. And so I was so thankful to be able to be that safe place for you and for you to start that journey because, what I hear you saying is that you were really tuning into your own bodily wisdom and not overriding yourself anymore and starting to say, wait, this means something. This is important. And I know for myself, part of my journey when I was teaching, like I really wasn't present to myself most days. I mean, I could go through most days and show up with a tension headache and an empty stomach, and I hadn't gone to the bathroom by the end of the day because I was just pushing through. Like so many of us live in these power through, but there's a power through point where then you can't
Mhm.
anymore. And so everybody's point where they hit that brick wall or that rock bottom or whatever the analogy is that works, you get to a point where you say, actually there is no more of this strategy to get me moving forward. So I need some new things. And that's commonly the point where people do come to therapy. I wish people would come sooner and not wait till it gets to that, but that is very common experience for people. So I think you're speaking to that for people. Like, you know, it often takes us getting at the end of ourselves before we'll ask for help, before we'll step in. And then the piece of finding the right fit, like it's really important in therapeutic alliance that you do absolutely feel safe and that the person that you're working with, you feel that you can trust implicitly and that they have your back and that they are working for you. And so that's so important to our approach here as a client-centered approach at Covey Wellness Centre. But that's important for the person seeking therapy to also feel empowered to choose, right? And to say, like, it has to be in alignment for you. I think there were red flags, and just to bring this forward for others, like, you know yourself well enough to know when you're not feeling like yourself. And so for you not being able to see beyond the end of the day or to have like a grand vision or to just be in survival mode, that might look different for other people, or the flags might be different to show to other people, oh, that's not like me. You know, so one of my red flags in my personality is if I start saying no more people,
Hmm.
like push the people away. I'm super social. I'm highly extroverted. I love being around, serving, working with people. Like that's my wheelhouse. It always has been. But if I start isolating and withdrawing and not wanting people around, what that's signaling to me, that's a flag that goes up to say, ooh, you're not yourself. This doesn't feel like you. This is not Sarah at her best. And I think you were noticing some of those things. And for our listeners, those are things that those are your watch for, is that you should have a good sense. And that's something therapy can help you with, is to determine a good sense of what those flags are for you, to recognize where you're moving into disintegration and into low health. And sometimes those are common things, like people aren't sleeping well, but there's specific things too within your personality and your patterns that, you know, oh, this is not me. I am not myself, right? And that flag goes up to say, maybe something needs to shift here. And then that stress capacity max out that you're talking about, right? We all have an ability to tolerate stress and to fluctuate those levels, but so many people with cumulative stress and traumas and different things piling up, you end up with a little tiny window of tolerance, and then that little tiny window tips you to either a hypo arousal, that those extreme anger, the intensity, or to a hyper arousal where you drop off, you withdraw, you sink into despair. So that margin becomes so small as people have metabolized more and more and more. And so that might be an indication too for people thinking about therapy. How much margin do you have to metabolize those kinds of stressors? Or is your tolerance this much and everything's a tipping point to, intense, disproportionate kind of reactions, right? So that's really great information for people thinking about therapy too. What kinds of things would they maybe be noticing, particularly if you're moving towards more of that in the crisis kind of reach out? So tell me what was hard for you about the whole process, even especially at the beginning. Like, were you stuck? Were you hesitant? How did you navigate like the vulnerability of that, right? And going into the deep work, because that's a big hurdle for a lot of people. And I hope it's okay that I say this, but you're an Enneagram 8. So those of you who are listening who are Enneagram 8s, that's a particular hurdle for that personality. So talk to me about that for you.
Yeah, I was going to share the exact same thing that
Okay, we're so aligned.
yeah, as an Enneagram 8, vulnerability is like kryptonite.
Yeah,
It is something that doesn't feel safe to engage in unless there is an extreme sense of safety
yeah,
in that relationship. And so, as an Enneagram 8, I naturally do not open up to people
yeah.
unless there is a significant amount of safety that that relationship container holds. And so I thought at one point in my life, I'm like, am I just a really closed off person? Like, is there something wrong with me? And it's just the way that I'm designed. It's my personality, and I'm just very discerning about who gets to
Close.
receive. my vulnerability and
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
something that I give away freely. So
Right.
it's a very sacred experience if I am stepping into vulnerable conversation. Otherwise, it's just a matter of like that person's not the right person for me to share these details of my life with. And back
Yeah.
to your point about having the empowerment of choosing the right therapist is critical because I do think that the population has a false idea that, oh, I just need to go find a therapist and any old therapist will be able to help me because that's their job.
Right.
And technically it is, but there's also the human experience that's happening on both the side of the therapist and the client.
Yeah.
And if that's not a good fit, then that client needs to feel empowered to continue searching for the right person.
Yes.
Uh, that's going to create that sense of safety in that space because the dialogue that needs to open up in therapy is not comfortable conversations.
No.
Like
No.
if I really want to make progress as a human being and enhance the quality of my own life experience, there has to be a willingness on my part to enter into territories in conversation that are not comfortable.
Yeah.
And, really having an ability to engage in introspection as well, especially
Yeah.
when in that reactive state for me, it was very easy for me to just be real mad about
Yeah.
everybody in my life and the world around me. And everything is everybody else's fault that
Yeah.
my life is the way that it is right now.
Yeah. That
And
explosive expression of anger, just like bull in a china shop. Like I'm just
yeah,
Tasmanian devil. I'm just a lot of energy coming around everybody.
is ready to pop at like
Yeah.
no notice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And while yes, there are circumstances, situations, and incidents that occur in our life that are not our fault, and there are people in our life that hurt us and do things to us to that end up causing us pain in some level. But the ability to let yourself go into a conversation where you also look at your own ownership, your own perspective, what your responsibility is for
Hmm.
your path forward. I can't see how those conversations would mesh beautifully if the therapist and client were not a good match for one
Yeah.
another.
Well,
Like that's critical.
it might actually be an indication if you're not moving forward, if you are aligned with a therapist and you don't feel like you're getting some of that momentum, it might be an indication that it's not a good fit. So, like our policy here is that we ask people to try 3 sessions because it does take a little bit of time, right? Rapport building takes some time. And again, sometimes longer on ramps for different personalities to really build the trust to go to the deep places. Um, but, it's perfectly valid and recognized here that if you're at the end of those 3 sessions and it's not aligning, it's not personal. And you need to feel that. Like I want to encourage you, if you're not feeling that alignment with your provider, then you need to be able to provide them with some feedback that either they can adapt and maybe they didn't realize that you wanted something more structured, or maybe they can adapt to that feedback and give you what you need, or it might just be that it's not a good fit. And so if that's the case, like don't, I always want to tell people, don't give up on therapy. Sometimes it takes a few times to find your person, and you'll know. But you do have to give a little bit of time to that, but you'll know after not too long whether that's going to be an alignment for you and it's going to be what you need. And you don't want to worry about hurting the therapist's feelings because you are the client and your value in the session is what the service is about. And
Mhm.
and my therapist here anyway, I do all the training of all of our new therapists and everybody coming in, all the supervision, and they're trained to know that the client's feedback is paramount, and that's part of your treatment plan is what the client is saying and what they're asking for, what they're needing. So that's super important.
I think
Um, yeah,
there's
go
another
ahead.
that I really had to come to terms with as well when I first started therapy was knowing that there was going to need to be change in my life.
Mm,
And
Yeah.
so if anyone's listening, with the perception that the therapist is going to fix things for,
Mm,
I think it's really important to understand that the therapist is the conduit for change to occur in your own life, and you're the only person that can bring about that change. And so
right.
there was a knowing in me going into therapy that, like, I know that my therapist isn't going to be able to solve our political climate in Canada. I know that my therapist
Don't
isn't
I
going to,
wish I could?
yeah, I know that my therapist isn't going to be able to reason with everybody in my family and friendship circles that I'm not crazy and that I'm not a bad person. I know that you have no impact on what's
Right.
happening in my life that is external to me to
Yes.
change any of those things that were triggering me so deeply at the time,
Yeah.
which that by engaging in saying, raising my hand saying I need help, knowing that that was going to require me to engage in a different way of
Hmm.
living, a different way
Yes.
of, going about my day to day. The idea that if we just go to therapy once a week or once a month and we talk about our feelings for an hour and our whole life changes,
Yeah.
I think people are really misled there. And so knowing that there's the responsibility is actually on us as the client to then
Hmm.
do something with what we are talking through in
Yeah.
therapy, and understanding what does this look like now that I have this new knowledge or new perspective or new tool, whatever it is that comes up in the dialogue, what is within my power and
Hmm.
control to produce a different result for myself in my life.
Yes.
So that at the time, because I was in such a reactive state, my capacity was almost nothing at that time.
Yeah.
That was a big thing that I had to like digest. Is like, do I even have it in me right now to enact any type of positive change in my life?
Yeah.
Um, the guaranteed answer would have been no if I hadn't have done anything. If
Right.
I hadn't have sought support, if I had have tried to go about enacting that change on my own, I was tapped out. I didn't know
Yeah.
what, there was nothing that I could do. I'd taken myself as far as I could go. So knowing that I was going to bring, a third party now into my life to help me navigate how to even consider having more
Yes.
capacity
Yeah.
to be able to enact change. I knew that it was going to require me
So,
to move differently.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a whole, there's a really interesting theory that comes out of addictions work on the cycle of change. And it looks at how change occurs for people. And so one of the first changes that someone makes in saying, hey, I would like some help, is the actual going to therapy. Like you feel like you're not doing anything. And this is particularly true for people who are really struggling with despair or depression or hopelessness. You know, part of what they're doing for themselves is showing up for this conversation. And that can be enough of a move to just that consistency for a bit, but there is this impetus as well that the change, you're in the driver's seat. This is what we say as our analogy here. The client's in the driver's seat and you're inviting a therapist into the passenger seat, but you're driving your car and you decide what direction it goes, how fast, how often we get in the car, what detours we take. You are the agent of change. And the cycle of change talks about how initially, the first stage is pre-contemplative, which is I don't have any idea that I have a problem and I have no intention of changing, right? Which is where lots of people are living in lots of different ways in their lives. We all have areas of our lives where that's where we are in the cycle of change. Then there's contemplation, which is, okay, I'm aware that something needs to give, but I don't have any intention of doing anything towards that change. Then there's preparation, which is figuring out the ways in which I would like to change, but you're still not to action or maintenance, which are the next two stages, followed by relapse. Because as we make changes, there's often cycles where we're back and then we're, in an upward spiral of circles that are getting smaller because we have the tools to move ourselves through that cycle. But those first three stages of change are not action oriented
Mm.
in the measurable, tangible way that we would think, they're action oriented. And so there is that participation in that cycle. And so you might actually spend a lot of time in a preparation stage because of how depleted you are before there's a lot of different actions other than the time you're committing to those life-giving conversations and to showing up to yourself, you know? But the more that you are able to give to the process between sessions, the more that gradual release of responsibility is given to the client, the more empowered you become, the more change you can see, the more it changes your overall life. So it really is dependent, you know, in our informed consent talks about, you know, knowingly and willingly agreeing to this, because if you're being dragged by the ear to therapy, you won't get anything out of therapy. You have to know that this is a place that you want to show up and see what it can offer. You don't have to have the answers for it. You can just come for the process, but there has to be a voluntary commitment to this. Just like if I was to go to the gym for a personal trainer, I have to agree to that, because if I'm not volunteering for that, he's not going to get any action out of me trying to get me to do whatever the thing is that he would have for me. And it's not a bad analogy for therapeutic work as well. Like if you just go to the trainer once a week, but you don't do anything in between sessions, you're only going to have the progress that the trainer can give you. And that might be one workout a week for a while. That might actually be really good and a really good change for you. But eventually you're going to be doing some other stuff at home, or you're going to be coming in a second time in that week and doing some of the exercises. And so how do we navigate that whole cycle of change? It has to start with, I'm committed to at least this change, right? And then we can move things forward. But that preparation stage for making change, like if you think about somebody who's coming maybe and trying to navigate a really difficult relationship, they don't come to therapy for 2 sessions and then they're like, yep, I'm out of that relationship. Like that almost never happens. It takes a long time because there's a lot of that work to get ready for the hard thing that you have to do. But we talk about it being a good kind of hard, you know, that it has this value. Yes, but it's not easy, and it's bumpy, and it's nonlinear. And so I wonder for you, Sarah, like what has been different in your life since you've been actively engaged in therapy? Like, how do you feel about that role in your life now, related to that?
Yeah, there's so much, because I look at the difference between, you know, what are we in April 2024 me and October 2021 me. So two and a half-ish years, I guess, have passed by now, which is crazy. That's how long we've been working together.
I know. Yeah.
Clearly in that more maintenance phase now. But it's not that anything in the world has changed. In fact, I would argue that things have gotten worse in that regard. Just seems to be this never-ending circus-like experience that we're just having as humans now, where it's almost jaw-dropping to witness our world across,
especially in Canada too. Like it's just really pronounced here. I don't know. I mean, we can speak to that more particularly, but like just our own experience of like where is Canada? Like, right?
Oh, and the heaviness that can bring about in a person is the heaviness that crippled me in 2021. And so my ability to view things that are outside of my control with such a discerning level of objectivity, I guess is how I would explain it. Just being able to witness things and then make conscious decisions around, you know, the level at which I'm going to choose to allow something to impact me. And if there is going to be impact, is it productive impact? Is there something that I can do with this pain? Or is this pain that I simply need to work through and allow, you know, whatever it's here to show me to reveal itself? So that capacity that I did not have in the fall, where any tiny little thing could have turned me into a metaphorical atomic bomb that fall. Whereas now there could actually be very, very concerning things that are happening all around me in my life And it's not that I'm not phased. There's concern,
Hmm.
there's obvious worry, which are normal emotions to experience. There's anger
Hmm.
that pops up. There's disbelief sometimes, where I'm like, I can't even believe that this is
Yeah.
our
Shock.
world right now. It's just like, what? Yeah, that.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yeah.
I feel all of these things. They're not being bypassed, but they don't control me anymore.
Yes.
So I'm able to live my life, do what I'm here to do. Um, you know, love my home, love my experience, love the work that I get to do, be able to show up for my people because I'm no longer being rocked by things that are outside of my
Right.
control. And it, it's it's empowering to be in this position, knowing how rooted I am, in that
Mm.
it's really, really, really hard to knock me over. Whereas
Yeah.
someone could have just blown on me in fall of
Right.
2020, and I would have, just house of
Yeah.
cards come crashing
Yeah.
down. So yeah, that's been significant. And the continued work, I think a lot of people do go into therapy, be like, I just got to solve this one thing in my life, and then
Right.
I'll be able to go back to living life normally. It's interesting when you start really doing the work on yourself and being open to that process, being open to seeing yourself in ways that maybe you don't want to see yourself in because you've guarded
Yeah.
yourself from knowing truths or shadows about
Yeah.
yourself.
It's hard to be honest with yourself sometimes.
But it's just be like, dang.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can feel very confrontational to really look at yourself in the mirror. But
Mm.
the beauty in that is that once one layer has been dissolved, being willing to look at what the next one is, because
Yes.
something else that's been repressed or hidden underneath all that other stuff, that's finally being given a chance to be witnessed. And you're
Yeah.
finally being invited to say, hey, you might want to look at this, because how is this issue now that is revealing itself impacting your life in what ways? And so
Hmm.
it has felt like over the last couple of years, like the true to form peeling of an onion, uh,
Hmm.
just layer by
Layers. Yeah.
layer by layer.
Yeah.
And I remember there was this one question I asked you specifically earlier on in our work together, because I felt like I was completely rediscovering myself
Right.
in ways that I had never known myself before. And I'm grateful now for everything that happened in our world, because it stripped me of everything that was not me. It put
Yes.
everything in my face that it's like, this isn't even you. Why are you so scared to let it go?
Right.
I asked you, I thought I was authentic before,
Right.
and now I'm meeting this new, realer version of myself. How do I know that this is the authentic version of me? And what you responded with has stuck with me, because I was authentic before based on who I knew myself to be.
Hmm.
I was still being true to me and who my perception of me was.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I was, lying or falsifying or branding myself as something that I wasn't. That's who I thought I was until,
I didn't.
my back was put up against the wall, and I had to face off with even more layers that came
Yeah.
falling. Like, oh, okay, this is me beneath all that other stuff. Now I get
Yes.
to be authentic from this space. And since that conversation, even more layers have come off. And there's
Yeah.
so many other things that our work has led us into really examining in my life, that it is not even why I came to you to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Uh,
has its own path, really.
has its own path, and just following that, being like, oh, I wonder what's here, and I wonder what's bubbling up here, and I wonder
Hmm.
why I can't seem to let go of this thing, and why is this rocking me so much? And so there's all
Hmm.
these things that I've just been allowing that process to unfold, because the proof has been in my journey that we're never done this work as humans. There's no end point where we
Yeah.
have solved everything. And as someone who, especially as an Enneagram 8, likes to aggressively fix things and address things
Yeah.
in swift nature to
Expedient ways.
get
Yes.
it done.
Yeah.
knowing that this isn't a process that I can rush. It's
Mhm.
not something, I'm not in a race. My coach says this to me too. He's like, you don't have to be in a competition with this. You don't have to get it done fast. I'm like, oh, right.
Yeah, there's time. Yeah. You take the time that it needs,
Yeah.
right? You're in
Take
the
the time.
driver's seat. So slow the
Yeah.
pace down or take the detour or take a break or whatever. Yeah.
I love that analogy because that is what it feels like, because there are sometimes things that flare up that are affecting me more than I would like them to.
Sure.
And we need to speed up this car right now. I need you in the passenger seat a little bit more often as we navigate this
Yeah.
one. Okay, you can get out now.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll see you in a month.
And you're the agent of that, right? And so one of the things that that it can feel like for people is that you're sort of like a reed tossed about in the wind where everything externally outside of yourself is controlling how your life goes. So you're just blown about by the winds of change or the latest political challenge or the expectations of your family or whatever. And you just feel like you don't have any control, that you just get knocked about, right? And so when you move it to an internal locus of control and you realize the agency and the responsibility and the clarity that you can have and the discernment about your yeses and nos and your, really harnessing that space that, that is between our reaction and our response and feeling empowered in that space to say, yeah, all this stuff is coming up for me automatically. I didn't try to get ragey or angry, but I don't have to carry that through to its natural sort of train track. I can hijack that and decide with my own choices within those moments how I'm going to respond, how I want to move forward. And when you're in a highly reactive state, you don't feel like you have that choice. You just feel like you're bound by the reactions to the swaying, winds of whatever. And so to get that empowerment of like, actually, I do have choice. I do have agency. I don't have to just be this reed tossing about in the wind. I can ground myself. I can root myself. I remember that being a real theme, is like getting really rooted for you, and feeling solid like that tree who, yeah, the winds are blowing, but I've got solid roots growing beneath this soil and I'm here and I can take the sway, but it's not going to break me. It's not going to
Right.
knock me over. It's not going to take me out because I'm so rooted. Right. And so I love that analogy and that idea of coming back to that empowerment, which of course for you as an Enneagram 8 is a new way of thinking about control, because it's not that Enneagram 8s actually want to control people. It's that they don't want to be controlled.
Bingo.
So if you are taking back that agency in response, so you don't feel like you're tethered to the control of others. You have choice, right? And that's so important because there are lots of things outside of our control. So how can we feel stabilized within and clear on how we want to navigate all those winds, and it's so important. The other thing you're talking about with the layers of an onion, the analogy, I'm sure I've used it with you, is that idea too of like seed coats. So if you imagine that there are these protective seed coats around a seed, I always think of a pumpkin seed. And it's that white coat around the little tiny seed inside of it. We have a lot of seed coats that have served us protectively for the time that they've served us. But if we really want them to flourish and grow from the ground, the seed coat has to fall away for that thing to emerge and grow. And I think there are multiple seed coats. It's like that's a layer, or that's a seed coat of protection, or a pattern that I have in my personality or in my family history or in my way of being in the world that's no longer serving me. And in order for me to move beyond, I have to let that fall away. And that's vulnerable. And
Yes.
because that's exposure, right? Like then the little essence that wants to grow forth, that's better and fuller and producing fruit, it can't come forward if you don't let go of the seed coat. And
That's
so,
been significant
yeah,
for
that's
me.
so good. Sorry, say
Yeah,
that again, Sarah.
that's been significant for me. And I remember when you said that in one of our sessions,
Yeah.
because my personality by design is to armor up and toughen up and just put the battle gear on and go, which,
Mm-hmm.
when that's channeled in a conscious and healthy way, can be very effective when it comes
Right.
to accomplishing things, achieving things, and I've been able to use that to my advantage. But when it comes to protecting myself,
Hmm.
that's where it wasn't serving me to
Yeah.
keep being on this chainmail of a seed coating. And
Yes.
that journey of letting it fall away and letting more tender parts of me show and letting my
Hmm.
heart make more decisions than my brain and
Hmm.
feeling into things, and instead of trying to cerebral my way through absolutely everything in life.
Yeah.
That's a significant shift that I've experienced
Yes.
as well. It's like we don't have to be in protective, defensive mode all the time, which,
Yeah.
was a trauma response that I didn't even realize that I had fallen into.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have so many things that have come up as patterns that have helped us navigate our lives to this point. And so kind of like Marie Kondo with her, like, thank you the thing and then let it go. It's this, we don't need to judge ourselves for that. We can simply say, yeah, thank you for protecting me to get to this point. But now you're no longer serving me. You've got me into the ground and now I need to be free to grow. And so it's not a antagonistic or judgmental or like self-loathing kind of posture. It's just a thanks for I can see how you were trying to protect me or trying to help me get to this goal or trying to open up this door. And so I can let go of that now. Because it's not serving me in this season. And lots of people have like sort of big, high level experiences like that somewhere in midlife. That's why we have the term midlife crisis. I like to call it a midlife opportunity, but
I like,
this is my little spin, my little reframe. But I think that, a lot of people do on a high level get to these points where they hit those things. It's like, what I've always done isn't serving me. And so I do, but I don't know what to do because what I've always done isn't working. And so all the things that I know aren't working. And so how do I move forward from here? And so, that speaks to that, whatever those things are, to let go and find your new way forward into, in my analogy there, the second half of life or whatever, that midlife opportunity. I wonder what you would say to people who might be on the fence about taking a first step towards therapy or mental health support. Is there some kind of encouragement or tips that you could offer them as they, consider this for themselves?
yeah, definitely. I think with anything, if we wait to feel ready, we'll probably die first.
Yeah, fair.
I
Yeah,
apply that to, the world of entrepreneurship when people
yeah.
say, I just need to wait until I feel ready. And then I'll start a business. Like, you're never going to feel ready to start a business. You just need to start
You're
the
not
beginning.
even ready when you're running a business.
No, I'm still not ready. And I'm like 6 years in. I'm not ready for
Right?
this. It's
Same.
crazy.
Yeah. Welcome to the journey, friends. Yeah.
Yeah. So not waiting,
Yeah.
until there's a
Some sort
crisis
of
level.
magical readiness or
Yeah,
yeah.
or some sort of, feelings like, I think today's the day I'm going to start therapy. I don't know that that's a normal experience for people to have. I think,
Right.
unfortunately, a lot of us wait until the pot's boiling over and we don't have a choice at this point but to reach out and ask for help. And so,
Mm,
being in more of this steady, proactive type of
mm,
therapy that I'm in now, it doesn't make sense for me to not be in therapy. Knowing what I know about, the human mind and the 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 pressures of society and just, the journey of entrepreneurship stacked onto the experience of being human.
yeah.
Which is a lot. And it's
Yeah.
just being human is a lot.
Yes.
Relationships, like there's just everything swirling around us all the time. And so I see it as having this steady in my life that I will always kind of use as a checkpoint,
Hmm.
because for me it's about being grounded.
Hmm.
uh, as a leader, as someone who shows up for a community that is arguably also navigating life and entrepreneurship
Hmm.
all at the same time.
Yeah.
it would be out of integrity for me to not make sure that I'm doing what's within my own power to keep myself well and not be like,
Yeah.
I'm fine now, and then fall off a cliff 6 months from now and then have to dig my way all the way out of that new thing that has popped
Hmm.
up in my life.
Hmm.
So knowing what I know now about the benefits of therapy, I would have started a long time ago because it's
Hmm.
likely that I wouldn't have got to a breaking point had I already had,
Right.
resource to be able to help stabilize me when things get difficult in life, and there have been difficulties that I've faced even since then.
Sure.
Um, and I've had to navigate those things too. If I wasn't in therapy, I probably may have collapsed under the weight of this new thing that popped up in my life and then had to
Yeah.
dig my way out of that hole all over again. So it's kind of like there's dips in the road for sure. This is just life.
Yeah.
Um, but they're no longer, the these great chasms of the mountain versus the valley. It's much more stable in that regard. So
Right.
I would also recommend that people don't wait until they're at their breaking point
Yeah.
um, prior to starting therapy. I'm someone who grew up thinking that if you're in therapy, there's something wrong with you,
Yeah.
um, or that's just for people who are like mentally ill. There's a lot of sarcasm around that conversation.
Yeah. It's a weakness or
Yeah,
deficiency. Yeah.
there's something wrong with you. It's a display of an inability of some sort. If you have to reach out for help, you can't figure out something on your own.
Yeah.
And I can see, when you get to a point of like deep rootedness, you're able to access a whole other level of vision, of consciousness, of an ability to witness and observe
Yeah.
without the emotional upheaval. And so I witness people in a very different way, whereas
Hmm.
old me, triggered me, unstable me would have been triggered by a lot of things.
Yeah.
Now I can just witness and observe people's behaviors, or
Right.
conflict that I may be in with people in a way that I'm not allowing to completely define me. And it's interesting. I can see when people don't have help. I can see
Yes.
when people don't have a person in their corner, whether that's a therapist or a coach or even just a really good friend, that
Hmm.
healthy conversations can be had with. And I'm not talking about friends that you can go and gossip with and complain to. It's like, do you have someone in your life that you can have healthy, constructive dialogue with?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know people don't have that in their life because
Right.
I can see that older version of me in them.
Mm. Right.
And,
Right.
those people probably don't realize that there's another way forward for them.
Hmm.
Just open themselves up to the thought of being in a relationship with someone who has professional services to offer. Like the
Hmm.
quality of your life, you may not even know what it could
Yeah.
be
Right.
because just normalized kind of feeling okay and not even allowed yourself to think it's possible for you to feel any other way given the nature
Hmm.
of your life, your work, your relationships, the world around you. You've just maybe settled for, well, I guess this is as good as it gets. It's like, man, we
Yes.
don't understand how good it can get until we
Yeah.
start, bringing in the troops and
Yeah.
opening ourselves up and seeing what's possible.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about like social support and kind of people fuel and how I think underestimated that has become in the COVID times because of all the isolation and how people in some ways I think have forgotten how important it is to have even just interactions, let alone like life-giving interactions, and just how significant having those resources. I love that word that you use, that this is a resource that you can draw on, right? That therapy can become a resource that you can access, another tool in your toolkit for life that equips you in different ways. And you begin in, once you've done some therapy, you begin to recognize when you need a therapy session and how that's going to help. And you start to feel empowered, right? So interesting to just think about how we can normalize this and take the stigma out of it and say this is the same as having a resource in a physiotherapist or a massage therapist or a naturopath or someone that's like, I can access that person and their expertise at the times that it's appropriate to do so for my holistic health and well-being. And it's just as normal as that. And get away from all the pathologizing language and the judgmental language because, we're not just solving problems, right? We're looking at the science of thriving. We're looking at how to live well, to make aligned choices, to find congruence within yourself. There's so many insights that can come through that it's very hard to quantify, but it's definitely not just treating illness, right? So,
It's
yeah.
like having
So
your own healthcare team.
that's right. That's
Who's on
right.
my healthcare team? I've got a therapist, I've got a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, I've got a coach, and
Yeah.
I have people that help me understand the world of nutrition better. So I got all these key people in my life that just help me to have an easier experience in living the best life that I can.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is really as simple as that. Like it's another resource for your collection of your team, your healthcare team. And I would love for everybody to feel like it's that kind of vibe. So, well, I know we're coming to the end of our time and such a great conversation. I knew it would be, and I really appreciate all your insights. I think it's very helpful to hear firsthand from someone embarking on this journey and experiencing it to allow people to connect with that part of it because it really is. I mean, I've had clients say to me that, who are first responders, that it was harder to call for therapy than it was to call someone to tell them their family member was dead. And
Yep.
like there's a huge hump, if you will, to get over here to take that first step. And so if we've done anything through this conversation to encourage you to really consider therapy or to re-engage with therapy, to bring it back into your life in a different way or to seek a therapist that's a good fit for you in this season for the reasons that you're things you're navigating or the struggles you're having, like, by all means, reach out. We're here at Covey Wellness Centre for that support, and we would love to serve you. Our orientation is to be looking for the goodness of fit. That's really, really important to me. So at the front end, we do some screening questions and things to try as best as we can to get you fit with the best person on our team. And if that isn't good, we invite you to come back and we'll go back to the drawing board for you because that is so important. So that's definitely how we operate here at the center. As a part of the final quick fun question, not that those weren't fun, but a particularly sort of fun question, because we're focusing on authors in this season 3 of the podcast and the intersection of their writing and work with mental health. We're asking everybody at the end of the season, what is in your bedside book stack? So
Okay.
I know that everybody has one of these that's a reader at all. Mine is getting ridiculously overwhelmed by how many are stacking up. But what's in your bedside book stack right now? I'd love to hear what you're reading and where you're drawing inspiration.
I love that you're asking this question because I think you're gonna love the two books that I have on my nightstand right now
All
because I
right. All right.
read one at a time. One
Same.
is The Biology of Belief by Bruce
Okay.
Lipton.
Interesting.
And when it comes to the way that we think our minds operate, the his compelling findings in his research suggest that our genes and our DNA are not necessarily the result of inheriting these things, but are rather influenced by what is happening around us and
Yeah.
are influenced by the thoughts that we have. And so
Interesting.
it's a paradigm flipping read to look at yourself in a completely different way, uh,
Mm.
based on what is influencing you as opposed to what you were given as a result of being born. So super cool read there. And the other
Really
one,
interesting.
also psychologically speaking, is The Scarcity Brain by Michael Esther.
Ooh, I don't know that one.
Oh, it's so good. I'm reading this one every morning right now with my coffee, trying to squeeze in as many pages as I can before I start my workday because it's just so fascinating. Again, it's all around what is our perception of what we're doing based on what our mind is telling us to do, what we're consciously taking part in, but what's actually beneath the surface at the subconscious level and how we're actually wired from a scarcity standpoint. And so
Mm,
really, really fascinating studies in this book as well
mm,
around pigeons and slot machines at casinos. And
wow.
um, yeah, it really just helps you understand the complexity, both of these books, the complexity of ourselves as a human being and the way in which our mind works and how much control we actually have over our mind versus letting the world just completely take us by storm and being
Yes.
susceptible to anything that's put in our path. We have a different level of consciousness that we can step into when it comes to being a willing participant in what's actually happening in our lives instead
Right.
of having our minds hijacked and then turning into these robots, which is becoming more and more likely as our society drifts closer and closer to technology everywhere.
Yes.
If we're not
Yeah.
careful and recognizing how we are being hijacked right now, we can fall into very robotic ways of life. So I think both of
Mm,
these similar but totally not at the same time, but both of them doing an awesome job of just opening my eyes to wow, if everybody understood that this was actually at play psychologically and
mhm.
biologically within us, I think we would approach much of our lives.
How much, yeah, illumination we would have, right? How much clarity and more discernment, right? That's a word that you said a number of times. I know that's something that I think we've lost touch with a lot in our culture is people being able to discern, and have that kind of critical thinking and clarity and curiosity and not just going floating along with the breeze, right? So wow. Well, those are great. So we'll make sure that those are in the show notes as well. So if people want to find those resources and authors, Sarah will put those together for us. Sarah, who is also working on the podcast notes, so it's lots of Sarahs here today, and so she'll put that together for us. And then Sarah, for people who want to follow along with your work or get connected with MYM, so we'll put those in the show notes as well. But just verbally let people know where they can find you, where you kind of find yourself, and how to track you down if they want to connect with you for entrepreneurship stuff or just follow along with your dialogue. Where would people find you?
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to share, Sarah. I'll direct people to my website because I'm not sure what the future of Instagram holds for me. And usually
That's
that's at the end
fair.
of all these podcasts. Say, oh, follow me on Instagram. I am Sarah Swain on Instagram. I am there actively right now. I just don't know what that's going to look like in the future. My website right now is completely under a rebrand right now, but the domain's still active. You can still contact me through there. It's just ugly. Sarah Swain,
Okay.
sarahswain.ca is my website. And yeah, for anything Monetize Your Mind related, whether it's the business community or the event, monetizeyourmind.ca is where you can get all the information for that.
That's great. And so we'll make sure we link to those as well for people who'd be interested in connecting with Sarah further. So again, thank you so much for risking this vulnerable conversation with me and for painting that picture for others. I think that's going to be such a helpful resource for people and such an important conversation to keep having and just normalizing therapy as a resource for everyone. So we'll have that available on the podcast and all the places that you listen. If this has been helpful to you, please like and share and subscribe in all those places so that you don't miss an episode from us and that you keep accessing the great conversations that we're having here. So thanks again, Sarah. I know I'll see you soon, and I really appreciate your time with us.
Thanks, Sarah.